And what's worked best for me is when I'm sharing stories, when I'm posting on social media, when I'm talking on podcasts, I'm talking to you as if you're my best friend. You want to talk to your readers like they're your friends. You want to have that level of empathy. You're in the pain with them. They're in the pain with you. They're in your story with you.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Another week means another episode with your favorite host, Andrew Dupy, Chief Relationship Officer here at Leaders Press. And this is, as always, Leaders Talk. And today on Leaders Talk, I am very happy to have with me the delightful Blair Kaplan Venables. So Blair is the founder and CEO of Blair Kaplan Communications. And she is also the founder of the Global Resilience Project. Sorry about that. Let me back that up a little. Let me do that.
No problem.
Blair is the founder and CEO of Blair Kaplan Communications and the founder of the Global Resilience Project. She became a badass social media marketing expert before the world dubbed social media marketing a thing. A question a lot of business owners had was, do you know how to use social media for marketing? And of course, being the savvy MacGyver-like person that she is, she always said yes. At the time, there were no courses, no webinars, no social media. So Blair applied what she knew about public relations of the world of social media and began offering it as a service. So MacGyver's a pretty big one to live up to. We got the theme that we might want to put in play in here. Well, you tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. And wow, what an intro. I literally came into the world blaring and have the gift of the gab. I've always been this like 5'1". Well, I guess I used to be littler. But I'm 5'1", big curls, firecracker, loud, deep voice. You know when I'm in a room. But I've always marched to the beat of my own drum, and entrepreneurship has definitely been pulsing through my veins. And I'm somewhat of an innovator in the sense of I've often created products or businesses based on things that I need that don't exist.
Well, tell me a little bit about the concept of resilience, because I know the Global Resilience Project is something that's very important to you. So let's kind of begin from there. What does that mean, global resilience?
Yeah, well, let's start by defining resilience.
Sure.
Dictionaries they define resilience as the ability to bounce back after a challenge. But what are we bouncing back to? What are we bouncing back to? I define resilience. The Global Resilience Project defines resilience as the ability to bounce forward from a challenging experience. You're moving forward, you're moving through, you're feeling to heal. You're becoming someone who can get through the hard stuff in life. And the Global Resilience Project is a community and safe space for people to share stories of resilience. And it's a container for big feelings. And we do this through books, our podcast. I'm a motivational speaker. We run events. We have merchandise and all sorts of other fun things. But resilience is the ability to step into the new version of yourself after overcoming a challenge.
That really fascinates me too. And I think that there's been a theme that we've heard a little bit on the podcast, especially, we're all overcoming the trauma of 2020, everything, and 2021. It didn't end. It was, 2021 was 2022 Electric Boogaloo. And, we've all at that point had to come up with an idea of, what is resilience? And I like this concept of not looking backwards. I don't think many people really were successful in trying to get back to what they were before, because so much had changed. You had to kind of change with it, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, I have quite the story, and maybe we'll talk about that in a minute, but a lot of people, like I'm talking like good friends, people who hardly know me, strangers on the internet, often will make comments along the lines of like, I don't know how you did it. Like, how did you get through it? And like, what are my choices? Like, you either end things or you push through. Like there's no middle ground when you're in a trauma. Yeah. So I don't know. Do you want me to tell you kind of what?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Share with us.
So, content warning, I talk about very heavy things. If you need to pause this and walk away and gather yourself, that's completely fine. If you feel like it's time to talk to a mental health professional, you can reach out to me and I will connect you to someone in your community if you can't find one yourself. I am the daughter of an addict. I'm a daughter of divorce. My parents divorced when I was 7. My dad had addiction issues to cocaine, injecting synthetic heroin and crack. When I was 7, my mom and dad divorced. My dad sold his business. He was a diamond dealer and a gemologist. He was very successful. And he basically left the family. And I didn't know he was sick. I thought he stopped loving me. I didn't understand because I was very close with him. And till I became an adult, he was just in and out of my life telling me I'll be at your birthday party and not showing up, or I'm coming to pick you up for dinner and not showing up. So I developed trust issues, abandonment issues, anxiety, depression, and a whole buffet of other ailments that came from trauma. And I had a lot of hate towards my dad. You can say my heart was shattered. And so in my 20s, I was actually given the tools I needed to forgive him. And so I forgave my father and decided to accept him for who he was. I'll, whatever he can give me as a father, whether it's a call or a text here and there, I just was done being angry. It was a very heavy burden to carry. And we developed a very beautiful relationship. He began his journey towards sobriety. He developed a relationship with my sister, his parents. He became more involved in all of our lives. I live in a different part of Canada than him. He started to come visit me a few times a year. He walked me down the aisle at my wedding. I got a second chance.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, at the end of 2018, we learned he was terminally ill. He had COPD, and later we learned he had lung cancer. And I felt like my heart was getting shattered all over again, and I didn't know what to do or how to process it. So I've always been someone who writes. I always had a diary, and, I like processing my feelings through words. And so I actually started sharing our story, which was something kept very private. Like no one in my life really knew about my dad's, addiction. And I started sharing our story, and our story of his addiction, my forgiveness, and our resilience was inspiring people to forgive a family member or choose sobriety or get therapy or share their story with me. And what I said to my dad was, we have something special. Like our story is inspiring people. Our story is inspiring people to get a therapist or to fix relationships. What if we wrote a book and we gathered stories of resilience from around the world and we bookended it with your story and my story? So when you're no longer here, your legacy can still help people. And so we started the Global Resilience Project in March 2019. And, I really do believe in manifestation. And I'm not saying I manifested any of this. In fact, it used to be called the I Am Resilient Project. So I'm glad it's now the Global Resilience Project because I am is such a powerful statement. Right. And this is going to sound like I'm listing off a laundry list because I am for the purpose of time. But from March 2019 until a year ago, this is what has happened. I learned my dad was going to die. And then my grandfather, who was like my dad, passed away. On the way home from his funeral, we got in a car accident, my husband and I got a concussion. A few months later, my husband almost died. He had a heart attack and quadruple bypass surgery. A couple months later, the pandemic. And not just that, this whole time we struggled with fertility. All I've ever wanted was to be a mom. And I was told I probably couldn't get pregnant naturally. And that was heartbreaking. About a year after Shane's heart attack, we actually got pregnant naturally without trying, which is magical, but we miscarried. 3 weeks later, my father-in-law suddenly died after a 3-week battle with cancer. 3 months later, my mother suddenly died after a 3-week battle with cancer. And then not even a year after my mom dying, my dad died. Right. I could have given up, but I didn't. I chose to keep going. I chose to put one foot in front of the other, sometimes very slowly. I took things moment by moment. And during this time, we worked on this book, obviously taking big pauses when we had to be in, where we needed to be in our, taking care of ourselves. But in June 2022, the first book, the Global Resilience Project book, came out and became, an Amazon bestseller in, multiple countries. And unfortunately, it didn't land in my dad's hand before he passed away, which is a bit heartbreaking. But from what started off as a legacy project became a global movement. We started a podcast called Radical Resilience. I became this motivational speaker. People started coming to me for advice. We launched a merchandise line with sassy dark humor merchandise about grief and resilience and all of the things in between. And what we really learned was that we all have a resilience muscle. We are all resilient, and there are things you can do to make your resilience muscle stronger so that when life gets hard, like your parents die within the year of each other, or anything less drastic or more drastic, that you can get through those challenges a little bit or a lot easier, but better than you would have if you didn't practice strengthening your resilience muscle.
And I think that it's important, despite the fact that that's a lot of heavy stuff, and I relate to some of it. I've been through many, some way, as we discussed events in my life. As it's important, though, to tell that story, because you can sit there and say, well, you should be resilient, you should bounce back, you should, or bounce forward, however you want to frame that, but without it putting it into kind of a context. And everybody understands context. I mean, isn't that really kind of how you've been able to connect with being able to build this kind of an audience?
Yeah. And I think it's also because I do have I have traveled a lot. I know a lot of people, sometimes there's someone I met on a cruise in like high school, right? Like it's,
Yeah.
I don't know, like no tons of people, but I know a lot of people, and I love building relationships, and I love learning people's stories. And I think because I always show up online, like I'm a social media expert. So showing up online, I show up as the real me, not the polished, this is what I want you to see version, but this is the good and the bad and everything in between. And I think what happens is that I build a connection with people because we all have the good and the bad,
Right.
but we're taught to hide the bad. We're taught to hide the sad, put on a smile, pretend you're happy. We don't need to do that. I don't do that. I invite you not to do that. Like, we are humans, and we don't need to go through the human experience alone. And I think when people hear like the range of things I've gone through, sometimes people have gone through things that I can't even imagine. And I have some people in my life who are like, wow, Blair, I've never gone through anything like that. My parents are still in love and together and alive. And I'm like, oh, that's great for you. If you can't relate to my story, like, I am jealous of you.
Right.
That's
It's a
nice.
story you kind of don't want people to relate to, really.
Yeah, but it's kind of like, pay attention though, because guess what? Everyone's gonna die. Like, your parents are gonna die. And it sucks, but like, I never even thought of it. My mom died suddenly, learned she had cancer, died 3 weeks later. And when she learned she had cancer, she was told she would have chemo and be fine. She went into the hospital because she was having breathing issues, and she was told she had 2 weeks left to live and died 3 days later. Okay. Like, it was whiplash. And it's so interesting to me because that happened so fast. People can't even wrap their heads around it, like the way that happened. And my mom died at 62. My dad died in his 60s. Dave, my father-in-law, in their 60s. I'm in my late 30s.
Yeah.
It was awakening. Like, it's like, whoa. None of these people retired. What am I going to do with my life? I'm not having kids anymore. I did not think I would be a childless, sober, parentless bird watcher. But I'm choosing not to have kids. I'm choosing to, turn my pain into purpose and help people, because my mom died and my dad died and a lot of other people died. But, it really made me realize, like, everyone's going to die. And my sister said to me when my mom died, like, this is my worst nightmare. And I said, this is crazy, because I never thought about mom dying, because her mom lived to be in her early 90s and had a diet of Chinese food and chicken fingers. Like, couldn't even wrap my head around the fact that my mom died. Like, my grandma lived to be in her 90s and like used to be a heavy smoker and like loved gambling. Like, so it just made me think about, like, I never thought about my parents dying. And like, I kind of want people to think about that, because you don't know when your time's going to be up with them.
Yeah.
And it's going to happen.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. We're in the same boat on that one. But I mean, my mother didn't make it past 48, and that's only 2 years away from me. So,
oh my gosh,
that was a big awakening for me as a young man. But that's it though. When you think about that, and you think about the concept of resilience, you're using your resilience as a positive to be able to tell your story and help people to strengthen themselves for the inevitable that's coming in life, whether it be death or pandemics or disasters, whatever it might be. Do you think that's a great way to use resilience?
What do you mean?
As in being able to take the energy of bouncing forward and then actually using that to help people by paying forward, telling stories, relating,
yeah.
pulling out. Yeah.
Some people, everyone's different.
Right.
Every time I share my story, it helps me heal. Like there's science that shows that when you share your story, it helps you process, it helps you heal. Some people it's still a fresh wound. Some people haven't processed it to the point where they can share it. You have to do the work. For me, sharing my story to help others, like that's how I'm resilient. Sharing your story helps you be resilient, but it's not the only thing that helps you be resilient. And you need to do other things to help you. And like, I'm also not a therapist. So, but I'm telling you what has worked for me and the members of our community. What's also really special is like if you've gone through something and you share that, and you share how you went through it and your advice, someone who's going through something similar will look to your story as a compass. It will be that lighthouse in a storm and help them out of their time, their challenge, because when you're in the thick of it, you're like, is this ever going to end? Like, what is going on? Like, for a while after my dad died, I was like, what's next? Like, I'm worried because I was at the end of like some very tragic stuff. But because I talked about it, I had support. Because I talked about it, I was able to heal. Because I talked about it, people came to me and felt like they can navigate their challenges. And that's where I'm at. And that's my purpose.
Yeah. So, Blair, a lot of our audience are potential authors, or some of them maybe have written a small book at one point or another. A lot of them are thinking about telling their stories, whether it be something that's just attached to their business or whether it be talking about their legacy. What advice would you have for somebody that's at the early stage of that hasn't written a book down, that's wondering, how am I going to actually take this story and relate it to an audience that's going to want to read it and then be helped by it?
Well, just the first thing is just start writing. Just sit down and start writing. Like you can figure out all the editing and how you're going to relate it later, but process it, get it out of you. It doesn't matter if it's consecutive or cohesive, but first step is get it out of you, get it out of your brain. And my biggest piece of advice and what's worked best for me is when I'm sharing stories, when I'm posting on social media, when I'm talking on podcasts, I'm talking to you as if you're my best friend. Mm-hmm. You want to talk to your readers like they're your friends. You want to have that level of empathy. You're in the pain with them. They're in the pain with you. They're in your story with you.
Yeah. So branching out into that, then how do you be able to actually connect social media with a book? I mean, I know it seems kind of obvious to a lot of people, but many others don't really know how to do it. It's like, okay, if I write my story down in a book, then, what am I going to do after that? How am I going to get people to see it? How am I going to actually be able to bring in the audience that I want that's going to benefit from this?
Right. Well, it's good to have a plan. So social media, I created something called the social media empowerment pillars. They're the 7 elements you build out in a social strategy so you can be seen as a thought leader or an authority in your space. And those are the 7 elements, build out. And the biggest thing about that is storytelling. It's storytelling. You might write a book that's however many pages, but you can't post that long on social media, but you can show up and tell stories. You can show on video, you can post a picture and write a paragraph. You can write a poem. But what you want to do is you want to document the behind the scenes. You want to take them into the world of writing a book with you. Like I'm going to be 38 years old on August 8th. And right now I'm doing a countdown. I started on July 1st. It was 38 to 38. And like I share stories. Like I shared that I had an experience where I used a plant medicine and my heart cracked open and that I'm on this hunt for joy. But right after my heart cracked open, I learned my dad was going to die. So like, I'm just healing from like my heart being so open. This weekend was camping and we got a message that our cat passed away.
Yeah, sorry.
But but thank you. But like, I share these things. It's like, I shared before the weekend, I'm going to go hunt for joy in my favorite spot in the woods. And I did, but then we came home early because the cat passed away. But then I went boating and kayaking, like, but I share it all because people want to know. And you know what, like, aren't you kind of nosy? Like, I know, like, I want to know it. Like, I want to know what like someone from high school is doing and then going down a vortex. Oh my God, they're divorced and have 3 kids. Oh my God, I know their ex-husband. And all of a sudden, oh, he works here with this person. Like people want to know. People want to know, like, why do you think reality TV is so popular? People like drama.
Yeah.
People want to know what's going on behind the scenes. So social media is the place to do that. And I like to say, tell, don't sell. You're telling stories. You're not selling services or products.
Yeah. Yeah, and you'd be surprised, honestly, about one of the major objections that I have seen from my years at this point in publishing is that a lot of potential authors, they don't know that people want to hear their story, or they feel like, well, why is my story going to be something that's going to relate to somebody? I mean, what makes me interesting? It's imposter syndrome, which has been brought up a lot of times on here. So what do you say to people that you connect with that may say, well, I'm not interesting. Why would anyone want to listen to me?
Well, I think, our life has been made up of all these little moments that have led to this very moment. We've all had those situations, of that pivotal moment as a kid where we wanted to be something and something changed, or that moment of, that moment where we had our first kiss, or, we all have these stories, but we're so concerned about not even living in the now, but thinking of the future that we can't remember what happened to us in the past.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's all sorts of writing prompts out there, but I think if you don't know what your story is, like, work with professionals, work with, someone like on Andrew or his team to sit down and get those stories out of you, because we all have a story. We all have a story about our parents. We all have a story about our family. We all have stories about the holidays. And we are all really interesting. I have never met a boring person. And if I have met someone who I deem maybe dry and boring, to me, that's extremely fascinating. It's like, why are you not animated? Like, oh my God, you collect Warhammers and like, I mean, I don't know. I'm just picturing someone I know, but like,
hey,
but I'm just saying, like, there's no, like, we are all interesting. Like, we all have this journey, and sometimes it's the quiet ones who are the most fascinating, but we all, and we also have our goals. So we have this life we've lived, and then we have this life we want to live. So we can also tell the story about who we want to be, who we are becoming. It's just not just about who we were or who we are.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely see that, because I've always told everybody's story is different. Everybody is there's only one you when you're out there, and somebody out there and all the billions of people in the world are going to want to hear that. There's someone that can benefit from it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And also, like, you've learned a lot along the way, and sometimes you don't realize it. Like, what I've really learned about the things I've gone through in childhood and recent years is that, after I've overcome an experience, a challenge, moved through something good and bad, there's always a lesson. There's always a silver lining. Like, you go through life learning lessons, right? Don't touch the hot element. Don't touch the hot element. You touch it, it's hot, you burn. Like, there's a story there. And so, like, if you're thinking and you're listening, it's like, Blair, I don't have a story, but you do. Like, you have a lot of stories that have led to this very moment. You just need some support in figuring out what those stories are.
Yeah, that's the difference between wisdom and intelligence, because you can be intelligent, you can read a book, and that, obviously accumulates into intelligence, but wisdom is a very different thing.
Yeah.
Everybody has different levels of wisdom depending on where they are in their life, right?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
So as we kind of wind down a little bit here, I like to end these with a little bit of a golden nugget. We've got a lot of really good ones out of this so far. But I'm going to try and pull one more out of it. Something that you haven't covered, something that you haven't touched on, that you think will actually really be useful to our audience, who many of them are just now beginning the process of telling their story. What advice do you have for them?
There is someone out there going through something similar that you have gone through, who are struggling, they feel alone, and they need advice and guidance. And when you don't share that story, they may not see it, and they may be stuck in that dark place a lot longer. And so your story can help them.
I love that, because that goes back to something that I heard once, that it's like, when you think about making a move like writing a book or doing something, don't think about the danger of what's going to happen if you put that book out. Think about the danger of what's going to happen if you don't.
Exactly, right? Like, if you don't share, and like, I don't want you to feel pressure to share your story. You don't have to, but if you're thinking of it and you're holding back because you're like, oh, it's not interesting, or I don't know, like, do it. If you're even thinking remotely about sharing your story, do it.
Absolutely. Well, Blair, how can our audience come and find their MacGyver in you and do it?
So if you're like, whoa, social media publicity, that's awesome, blairkaplan.ca. And you want to learn more about the Global Resilience Project, you go to theglobalresilienceproject.com.
Awesome. And those links are down below, ladies and gentlemen. Blair, it was a pleasure as always. You are absolutely a delight. I enjoyed talking to you, and I'm sure that our audience had absolutely loved listening to you.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you to everyone who listened. I hope we connect. Oh, and if you're on Instagram, I'm at Blair from Blairland. Reach out.
Excellent. All right. All that is down below, Blair. We wish you the best.
Thank you.